All right, everyone. I'm joined today by TNSN analyst and draft expert Craig Button. Craig, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, I don't know about draft expert. We all look at it with a curious eye, and we all make confident projections. And then the key is looking back in time and saying, okay, why did that player turn out better than we thought? Why did he not turn out as good as we thought? So, what I love about it, Marco, is the passion that people have for it, and I think there's such an interest with fan bases. Depending on where you are in the standings, depending on where your lot in life is in the NHL, it can either be for the current year and your prospects for competing for a Stanley Cup, or what your prospects look like in the future to compete for a Stanley Cup. So I love doing it. I love having fun with it. And, the next person that is perfect in that regard is going to be the first.
Yeah, it's exactly that. It's a pretty inexact science, and I think that's the thing I love the most about kind of watching, especially this year. This year has been such a hyped year in terms of prospects. Be it already drafted or upcoming, that there's the projection is even more difficult, is even more precarious, because here we are, a 19-year-old tournament, for example, in the World Juniors, and we have all these 17-year-olds standing out. Like, how do we project their performance versus the quality of play, and where are they going based on that? So it's a conversation I've had with a few people over the last, I would say, couple of weeks, but would love to get your take on it, especially the World Juniors this year. I feel like this World Juniors was probably the craziest in a really long time.
Yeah, I don't know about crazy. I think that when we think about the tournament and kind of returning to a normal pacing and a normal rhythm, and and the environment, which was fantastic in both Moncton and Halifax. And so, there was a return to that after, the last time it happened was in early 2020. So it's 3 years removed, and, you look at it. And then you consider that Russia is out of the international hockey scene right now. And so you can't just have four teams that think they have a chance to compete for a gold medal: Canada, the US, Sweden, and Finland. To have Czechia and Slovakia perform at the level they did in a competitive nature, and it wasn't accidental. Like, no. There's times when you come into a tournament and a team go, oh, wow, look at what they did. They just stood on their heads. They had just these unbelievable performances and a great amount of luck. That wasn't the case with Czechia and Slovakia. Good teams, good competitive teams, and Switzerland had strength, and Latvia just couldn't score, but they were a good team. So when you look at it all the way down the line, it was terrific for international hockey, because if you just start to narrow it down to a select few teams that think they can win, that is not good for any international tournament. So if that's how I would define crazy good. Crazy good,
definitely.
Crazy good in some of the performances, the individual performances, the team performances, some of the goaltending performances. It really was an exciting time. And I can only tell you this: being in the buildings, the excitement was palpable in terms of the enthusiasm from everybody involved.
Yeah, the Maritimes generally don't disappoint when it comes to these international tournaments. Halifax is close to home for me, so the Scotiabank. I saw it rocking. It was peculiar, though, because there was a lot of complaints at the tournament because of ice quality, since it was so hot, uncharacteristically hot this year, or mild. And yet we still saw some great transition hockey, which in fact allows me to transition to discussing some of these prospects in the tournament, especially for Canadiens fans, watching Joshua Roy kind of come up clutch yet again for Team Canada in this edition of the tournament. I just want to get your take in terms of the evolution of his game, because we kind of knew the skill scoring dynamic, but we saw a little bit more from him this time around.
Yeah, I've been really lucky, Marco. My friend John Goyens coached the Lac St. Louis Lions. He's coaching now in Cape Breton now. And so when Joshua Roy was playing in the Midget 3 league, he was the first overall pick in the Quebec League draft, but Lévis was the top team in the league. They'd lost 2 games that entire season. Joshua was also part of the Quebec team that won the Canada Games gold medal that year, upsetting a very good Ontario team that included Othman and Brant Clark and Shane Wright. So Joshua was so I had the opportunity to watch Joshua play back at that when he was 15, 16 years old. I mean, there was no question he was the best player in the Quebec draft. And so before I get to the development and progression of his game on the ice, I have so much admiration for Joshua, because Joshua, goes to St. John, and a year and a half into it, and the pandemic and different scenarios and different challenges, he left at Christmas, and he said, "I'm not coming back. I'm not getting what I need, and if I'm not getting what I need, I can't give what they need." And he informed the management of the St. John Sea Dogs that he wasn't coming back, and he essentially said, if you trade me, great. I'd like to be traded, but if not, then maybe I just won't play hockey. And then, he took his career into his own hands. He recognized what he needed. I tell every young player, you don't have to just be someplace just because somebody drafted you, if it's not right for you, there's a way to handle it. There's a way to manage it, but you've got to take control of your own career. Joshua did that. He ended up in Sherbrooke. He ends up being a 5th round draft pick. And people go, well, how did they get him in the 5th round? Well, a big part of it in the 5th round was he hadn't been able to demonstrate all the qualities that he had, offensively or otherwise. And, he'd shown enough, and the Montreal Canadiens, I think, had a pretty good background on Joshua. And they said, hey, listen, we're getting to this part of the draft. Like, come on, let's just take him. And they did. And all Joshua's done since that point in time is just, his game has just progressed and progressed and progressed. I mean, a leading scorer in the Quebec League during the 21-22 season, plays on Team Canada in the August gold medal tryout, comes back, a key, like, he wasn't just a player on this 2023 gold medal team. He was a key figure in so many different areas of the game. And so when you talk about the progression of Joshua in everything, we know he's a gifted offensive player, but he's a smart, competitive player. There's so many things he can do in a game to help your team win. And, you think about Connor Bedard, and I think about Thomas Milic, who had really significant impact on the team and the team's result. Joshua Waugh's impact was right there with those two guys in different ways, but no less significant for Canada winning the gold medal. And I said this on the broadcast during the tournament. Joshua Waugh is going to be in the NHL and be a good player in the NHL because he's got the skill, he's got the brains, he's got the competitive spirit. But I love the fact that Joshua said, you know what, I got to take control of this situation and not just go along. And him taking control and Montreal having a background and selecting him is going to be to the great benefit of the Montreal Canadiens for a lot of years, in my view.
Yeah, well, that was basically what we thought, because even the end of the pandemic year, like that string of games, I think he played 20 some odd games with Sherbrooke to end the season. And he had, like, I think he was scoring at a 45 or 50 goal clip for them in that time. So, like, you already saw the turnaround. But I remember having a conversation with coach and GM and also assistant coach for Team Canada, Stéphane Julien, who acquired him and paid quite a sum to St. John to acquire him. And he said, that's a franchise player right there. You take that, you mold that. And the biggest joke that I had the first time I spoke to Joshua was the defensive game. He straight up said, like, no joke, I suck defensively. I really need to bring this up. And I was taken aback by how, like, self-critical he was. And here, not even a year after our conversation, he was on the penalty kill and he gets that empty net penalty kill goal, right? Just the maturity, the progression. That's why I tend to agree with you, because that hockey sense, you can't teach that. You can take summer classes when it comes to your skating. You can hit the gym as much as you want, but you just can't teach hockey sense.
Yeah, and yeah, I totally agree with you there. And he's got a great self-awareness too. Awareness of his strengths, awareness of where he needs to improve. And again, it goes right back to an awareness of what he needed. And you know what? Like, I never heard any commentary from Joshua being negative about St. John or anything. He just said, I needed something different. And Stéphane recognized, hey, listen, I got an unbelievable opportunity to get this player, right? And look what he's done for Sherbrooke. And there's no question that part of development is not only a willingness of a player to work at his game and to work in different areas, to not only advance his strengths and develop the strengths, but also be aware of the areas that can be better. And Joshua's done that. And like, you think about it, like, he just so significant. I mean, the December tournament last year that got canceled, postponed. I mean, he was at the camp, not by accident, and he didn't make the team. But, when the opportunity came in the summer and after what he did last year, there was no question he was going to be on the August team. I don't think anybody doubted that. But so you think about the progression he had made, in 6 months, and, and these progressions that he's made, to me, have really put him in a position as one of the, like, really, one of the very best drafted players outside the NHL. I mean, you think about a 5th round pick now moving into that spot and becoming that type of a player and regarded in that manner, that speaks volumes about Joshua. That speaks volumes about him. And you know what? And like I said, he to me, he's going to be a really good player for a lot of years for the Montreal Canadiens.
Yeah, I had Stéphane Julien projected him to be a very similar player to Tyler Toffoli, currently with the Calgary Flames. That similar clutch hockey sense, can play him in any situation kind of guy. I liked it at first. Obviously, Joshua has higher aspirations. He compared himself to John Tavares, but I could see the play style, just not the same physical attributes.
Well, but think about this, and this, if Joshua continues to progress in the way he has, I don't think Joshua's putting limits on himself, and I love that too about himself. If Stéphane has a real firm grasp on assessment, and if he compares him to time, that's a really good comparison. And but at the same time, Joshua has been a frontline player, and I think what he's really trying to convey is, I believe that I can be a frontline player in different ways again, and you know what? Help him try to be the best he can be. And if the best he can be is this level, okay, max out there, but don't leave yourself short. And I think what Joshua has done is not leaving himself short in terms of what he is and what he can be. And it's maturity in so many different regards, and really great admiration. I really do. And he's become. And I talk to a lot of parents, young kids. What should we do? Should we go this route? What the draft's coming up. I'm talking about the draft in the respective junior leagues, and I tell them the same thing. Like, you got to take control of your career. Well, Joshua now has become a great poster boy for me to use as an example, because he's a great example of taking control and not letting something control you.
Yeah, definitely. And I think one of the main things is, he took control of every opportunity he was given, even at Canadiens training camp. Not this most recent one, he had a hand injury, but the one prior, that was his coming out party right after being drafted. And now the question has moved from, is he one of their top prospects, to, is this guy going to be ready to play in the NHL next year? And that's a tough projection to make.
Well, when you think about the Montreal Canadiens, and it's probably a little bit of an opportunity for me to talk about Martin St. Louis.
Yeah.
And you think, so we're taping this or recording this on January 17th. And in the 81 games that Cole Caulfield has played with Marty St. Louis as the head coach, he has 48 goals. So if he happens to score 2 goals in his next game against the Winnipeg Jets, which will not be easy, that would mean he scored 50 goals in 82 game schedule. 48 in 82 is pretty good. 49 in 82, but yeah, you're right that he should get paid. But Marty St. Louis is such an unbelievable competitor. He wants to win more than anybody, and it's a great quality. But he's not measuring winning in terms of team wins right now. He's measuring winning in how much the players are progressing, how much they're taking in, how much they're understanding. I think it's such an unbelievable perspective for somebody who is so wired for success and measured in wins and losses, to be able to, recalibrate, his approach. And I think his approach has been fantastic for the Montreal Canadiens. It will continue to be fantastic for the Montreal Canadiens, which leads me into Joshua Waugh. If you're skilled and you're smart and you're versatile and you're competitive, I like your chances to catch the not the eye of Marty St. Louis, but the to say I want to work with that player, because Joshua is the type of player that I believe, like, with specifically focused on Marty, is that Marty will bring out the best in him. So I'm not going to say no, he can't play on the team next year. I'm going to say if Joshua continues doing what he can, he will give himself an opportunity, and Marty will look at Joshua as just as another player that I can help develop. Because, as you know, this is about the Montreal Canadiens becoming a really good contending team in the next years. Not this year, probably not next year, but, continuing to build on that. And Joshua was a big part of that.
Yeah, and it's definitely a player that he's singled out during training camp as being like a guy who caught my eye. And then there was another prospect who had his coming out party this training camp who caught Martin St. Louis' eye, and St. Louis was very vocal about wanting to work with him, and that was Owen Beck. And Owen Beck kind of had the same kind of weird kind of year as a guy like Joshua, because his season, obviously, his draft stock was affected by the pandemic, OHL not playing a 16-year-old season, gets drafted in the second round. Some had him in the first, comes into training camp, lights it up, gets his entry-level contract, goes back to the OHL, and then comes to Canada's camp and is one of the last cuts. Almost to that point, almost the same kind of season as Joshua. This time around, however, the tournament wasn't canceled, and Owen got the call back, unfortunately, from Colton Dach's injury, and went from 13th forward to staple on the fourth line to scoring or to being part of some big goals. I wanted to get your take on him as well.
Well, what we have to keep in mind with the players from Ontario, Owen missed 18 months of playing hockey.
Exactly.
18 months. And those are really key developmental, months. And when you think about a player, because you come into the OHL and you test yourself. You've been a good player at the U16 level. Now you're coming in, you're playing against older players for the first time, players much older than you for the first time. And it really helps you understand, okay, what do I got to work on? What do I have to get better on? What do I have to adjust? And those things are numerous. But one thing with Owen is that he has this tremendous hockey sense. And, we talk about Joshua. Owen's hockey sense is outstanding. And, you can put him in so many different situations. And I think we're going to see a lot of players from Ontario, from that, whether it be the 04 cohort, even the 05 cohort, some of the 03 cohort, that we're going to see these developmental, what I would call jumps. Usually you don't see jumps like that. You see more of that steady improvement. You go, wow, gee. But I think you're going to see those jumps because they missed 18 months. And I think we're going to get other players, coming from, they go, wow, and there was nothing, I don't think there was anything. When you don't watch a player play for a period of time, it's hard to measure his improvement. But the 33rd pick in the NHL draft is a high pick. I believe, Marco, that there's 20 first-round picks for certain. Everybody can put 20 players on a list and go, these guys are first-round picks. I think after that, 21 to 45, that's mine. I use 25 players that I think are first-round picks. It all depends where you're picking. I can guarantee you the Montreal Canadiens, if they had the 28th pick, would have taken Owen Beck.
Oh, yeah.
like he was the first. So you have this group of players because all you got to do is listen to him. Oh, geez, we couldn't believe he was there at 39. We couldn't believe he was there at 37, right? Because they do have him rated in the first round. So, I know there's only 32 first-round draft picks, but I think there's a pool of players, 25 players, I use 21 to 45, that I think fall into that. So Owen Beck was a first-round draft pick in my view. So, yeah. And highly regarded. It's interesting when we go back to last year's draft and, Shane Wright, a centerman. And, all the discussion and everything. And, they made a decision that Juraj Slafkovsky was their guy. And I said it, you can't go wrong. You're not good. It wasn't like you're passing up Connor McDavid for there was no way they were going to go wrong if they took Juraj Slafkovsky first, add some size. But the minute they traded for Kirby Dach, it was like, there's some more intel into. And then when they drafted Owen Beck in the second round, I'm going, well, so they get a big potential right shot center in Kirby Dach. They draft the second. They draft in the second round Owen Beck, a right shot, really good two-way center. Montreal might have been able to get their cake, their icing, and their ice cream as well.
Yeah,
And then sometimes the draft has to fall in your favor in that respect, but you also have to have a plan of what you're doing and how you assess. So, there might have been some consternation from some circles. How can they not draft Shane Wright? But when you look at how it all fell out from one, the trade to Doc, and then Owen Beck coming in, it's pretty bloody impressive the quality of player that the Montreal Canadiens were able to get, through the 33rd pick, and I include Kirby Dach in that because
yeah.
you gave up you gave up something pretty significant in a first round pick to get a young player.
Absolutely. And I think that, we were looking at that kind of organizational depth, right? And, going back to Owen Beck, center was a huge need. And that progression since the draft has been staggering, and just going from about 3/4 of a point per game to almost 1.5 per game. But what's been interesting, and that's something he spoke to me about wanting to fix in the summer, was the goal scoring, shooting more, being more of a dual threat. And we saw it with the Mississauga Steelheads. We're seeing it now with the Peterborough Petes. But we also saw him take, impressive shots, and some of the offensive choices that he made led to some pretty big goals for Team Canada as well. What have you seen from his game so far in terms of progression that could translate to something more than simply just a checking center?
Yeah, I never thought that Owen was just a checking center. I thought Owen would be a really good, two-way centerman. And when you have Nick Suzuki, and when you have him at the top of your center slot, right? Well, now he carries so much of the heavy demands, and you need that from a number one center. Owen Beck is somebody that understands what the demands are, and he's going to be able to adapt and be able to perform. I think what you see in the OHL is probably what you're going to see in the NHL with Owen. You're going to see somebody that comes in, probably is really good, without the puck. He's not going to put up as much offense, and then it's going to progress as he gets more comfortable into the offensive side of things. And, when you can put a player, in those spots, a lot of players, younger players, they've scored so much and they've been so prolific offensively that when they move up levels and they don't have that success, it impacts them. It impacts their confidence. But because Owen has other parts of his game so much in order, it's not going to. He knows that he can contribute. He's comfortable contributing that, and at the same time, he'll continue to grow, just like he did in Mississauga last year. It's interesting when James Richmond, the GM and coach of Mississauga, said, "You know what? Do I want to trade Owen Beck? No, but I'm not so sure he's coming back to my team next year. So, maybe the time to strike when the irons are hot, right?" But I think that speaks volumes about how James Richmond, who's drafted Owen, watched him develop. I think it speaks volumes when, not only does he, get the quick call to replace Colton Dach with an injury with Team Canada and be used, which becomes important, but, his current GM and coach, James Richmond, his former GM and coach, says, I'm seeing a player that ain't not coming back to my team next year. So I think that tells you a lot about Owen Beck and what his trajectory is.
I actually had that conversation with James Richmond last summer, where he's like, you'll see. I'm not too sure he'll be around for his 19-year-old season. You'll see. And then legitimately 3 weeks later, Canadiens development camp, rookie camp starts, and he just looks like a dynamite player in Buffalo and again in Montreal. And it's just that upward progression. So a lot of Canadiens fans were confused that an 18-year-old was traded at the OHL trade deadline. But it speaks more to him than it does necessarily the rebuild in Mississauga.
Yeah, it does. Well, it also speaks to reality. It also speaks to a reality that James Richmond says, you know what, I'm like, the chances of me having him back next year aren't high. So I need to have a good team next year. And, what's the return for somebody significant like Owen? And James isn't looking at it. He's not going, well, I need to trade Owen back. He doesn't want to trade Owen back, but he's also looking at the reality of the situation. And that speaks volumes about Owen, that probably, is telling James through his play, you know what, like, I love playing here. You've really given me a great opportunity, but you know what? I might not be here next year. And it's not him saying it, it's him, like, through his actions, doing that. And it's pretty impressive. And again, learning. Like you talked about hockey sense earlier. Like, you can play in the NHL with average hockey sense. You cannot be a good player in the NHL without good hockey sense. It's impossible. I don't care how fast you skate. I don't care how hard you shoot the puck. You cannot be a good player. You can be a serviceable player. You can be a player that plays a specific role and different. You cannot be a good player if you don't have good hockey sense.
Yeah, it's something that a lot of teams have had to struggle with especially in the draft floor. You see a guy with all the tools, but just can't put the toolbox together. And yeah, it's definitely frustrating, especially earlier on when size was like a determining factor. Even at the top of a draft. Now we're seeing a guy like Connor Bedard, arguably the greatest prospect since Crosby, since before. And he's barely 5'10". Like, that would have been blasphemy not 10 years ago. So it's fun to see what the focus has become. And I'm glad that we brought it to this point, because I want to talk to you about the other guy that the Canadiens picked in the second round in 2022, in Lane Hutson, who is, we all thought he was going to be good, but what we've been seeing at Boston College and what we saw in the small glimpses with Team USA is just a player that is far more well-rounded than we gave him credit for.
Well, one thing I have to correct you on, because my BU Terrier fans are going to get mad at you for saying Boston College.
Oh, I said Boston College again. Boston Terrier.
It's okay.
Yes.
You did, yeah. Boston BU Terrier. You just got.
I was just doing a call actually with Boston College's, I believe, Cutter Gauthier. I think that's where
Boston College. Yeah.
There you go.
But anyway, I just we gotta just make sure that my BU friends. I got lots of BU friends. So anyway, that being said, I don't know. Prior to the World Junior Tournament, I previewed some prospects. I previewed some NHL drafted prospects, and Lane Hutson was one of them. And I've watched Lane play since he was 16 years old. And, and all he does is meet every successive demand, whatever the next challenge is, he meets it at whatever level he is. And I said this in the write-up with the prospects. If Lane Hutson was 5'11", he would have been in consideration for the first overall pick. There's no question about it. He's not 5'11". So people go, why was it? Because he's not 5'11". That's the nature of it. And Lane's 5'8", 5'8.5", and we know everything that he did to show that he'll grow and everything. And that's all wonderful. But all Lane Hutson does every time he plays is show how superior he is to the competition. And so, like, he played U18 when he was U17. He was on the junior team at 18. He's been one of the best defensemen in the entire NCAA as a freshman. So when you watch Lane Hutson, and I always say this about Lane, I mean, it's just like, yeah, maybe we look back in time and go, yeah, well, he should have been drafted in the first round. I don't think anybody questioned Lane as a talent. But you know what? Like, the smaller player has to continue proving himself. Well, Lane just keeps proving himself time and time again. What I've always seen with Lane, and I've continuously seen it, he is always, vast majority of the time, so always isn't the right, vast majority of the time, able to play the game to his strengths on his terms. A lot of players get overwhelmed. They get caught in spots. But when I watch Lane defensively, offensively, wherever he is, he's able to play it on his terms. He's great at reading the play defensively, getting a stick in there, getting under opponents. So I never see Lane get overwhelmed. I never see Lane get overwhelmed physically. He doesn't go and try to take on opponents physically because he knows his chances are limited. So he takes them on with his strength. Quick hands, quick feet. I'm gonna beat you with anticipation. I'm gonna have that puck off your stick before you even know it's off your stick. And then we know how brilliant he is offensively. I mean, the edge work, the puck skills, the vision, the deception. I mean, and can you have Can you have an NHL team with lots of Lane Hutsons on your blue line? No, you can't. But you can have Lane Hutson on your team, and you pair him with the right guy and give him the right support. I'll tell you what, he's going to be a big-time contributor. And Lane is a big-time competitor. And Lane hasn't even started growing or physically maturing. I see him, and I'm still amazed. Like, you know, when I look at him, and I just go, yeah, you got lots of growth ahead of you. Like, you know, but I know what you think, and I think that he's just a terrific young player. And he'll play in the NHL. He'll play in the NHL, and I think put him in the right spots, support him the right way. He'll be a really good NHL player.
Well, you know, one of the things that caught my eye actually was the U18s last year. You know, I had eyes for Seamus Casey when I was looking at the U.S. national development team, and I came away absolutely impressed by Lane Hutson, who was the highest scoring defenseman for them, and him and Logan Cooley on that power play, just kind of working it together, was impressive. But I found for a guy that's perceived as being this offensive force, his 5-on-5 play is what I find to be even more impressive, because you don't expect that from him. Like, even at the World Junior Championships, one of the things that came out to me the most was his gap control, was his ability to win a grand majority of his one-on-one battles. That's what stood out to me, because you know the offense, you know he's a clutch player for the Terriers, but it's the little details that are going to help him get to the NHL that he's already doing so well. So I guess my question is, defensively or playing against bigger players, you know, the worry was he'll get overwhelmed, but you know, more and more tape that we watch, it's more and more likely that he has the kind of personality, given his limitations, that he could actually overcome a lot of the fears that some scouts had in him.
Well, and those fears, you know, I think you have to evaluate your own biases, evaluate your own fears in light of each individual player. But what I'll say about Lane is that you just talked about gap control. So Lane doesn't sit back like somebody's coming down the wing. He's not sitting back and letting that guy, you know, put the puck in his corner and take a run at him. Lane's right up on him. But that guy turns to get, and Lane's underneath him, and he's underneath his stick taking the puck from him. Listen, Scott Niedermayer was a great NHL defense. Great. And when we know how great Scott Niedermayer is. And I'm not saying Lane is Scott Niedermayer. But Scott Niedermayer, that's how he played. The anticipation and the skating. Like he would be up in your space, take the puck from you, wheel, turn, and somebody was going, where did that puck go? I just had the puck. It's gone. Lane does the same thing. When I say he uses his strengths, he gets into a defensive situation. He gets in there quick, uses his fantastic hands and stick work, and sometimes it's just stripping a puck. You watch him how well he is with a stick, and then sometimes he just strips you of the puck, puts it in a spot, then his quickness gets to the puck, and then he makes the outlet pass. He knows he's not going to get into an advantageous position in one-on-one physical battles, not at this point in time. But his leverage underneath players, his skating, his thinking, he's brilliant. He's brilliant. Like I said, I don't throw that comment out. If he was 5'11", he would have been in consideration for the first overall pick. I don't throw that out by accident.
We've had 4 different scouts say the exact same thing to us. Yeah. We even had Mike Morreale of NHL.com basically say, like, top 10 talent easy. And if he was 5'11", top 5 without a question. Yeah. So I've gotten that a lot, and so it is an interesting thing. And you know, you talk about playing him with the right players. Montreal Canadiens defense is full of giants at this point right now. Like, you have Caden Gooley, you have Arber Xhekaj, you know, Justin Barron's no small player either. It's 6'2" at this point. So it is the right mix of talent, and that, I think, is where Kent Hughes kind of was able to identify a guy like Lane Hutson as what they're missing.